This is a hosta. This is a box. I hope you can tell the difference because I apparently cannot. You've heard about Larry the Cable Guy, but today I'd like to tell you a story about my friend Larry, the Hosta Guy. Larry is a little bit like Columbo. He's always got one more thing to tell you, and then one more thing after that. A year ago, Larry was taken to the hospital by ambulance. His blood pressure had spiked, and he had a lot of things going on. And as the EMTs were taking him to the hospital, they wanted him to be in constant communication so that they knew that he was still with them. And so they reminded him occasionally, Larry, we need you to keep talking to us. And Larry, keep talking. Well, Larry has what we call the gift of gab. And so he had to laugh at this later on in the hospital the next day when I saw him. He told me, he says, Pastor, he said, in all my years, no one has ever had to tell me, Larry, please keep talking. That's important. We'll get back to that later on. Well, at some point last year, I had visited Larry and his wife Casey at their home, and they had all these beautiful hostas in the planter boxes out front of their home here in St. Paul. And I complimented them on them. And Larry said, well, they were kind of overgrown and we need to divide them. So next year we'll split them up and we'll give you some. And I said, well, thank you very much. Well, being a man of his word, Larry called me before Memorial Day this year, and he'd gone out there with his spade and dug them up. And he called me. He said, Pastor, he said, I've got those hostas for you. I said, well, okay, great. Thank you, Larry. I'll swing by tomorrow and pick them up. Well, Larry had five hosta plants for us. This is one of them. I dug it up this morning from my front yard just for purpose of illustration, and I will plant it again at noon when I get home. It's doing, as you can tell, very well. And so anyway, I had five plants, some compost, and it took about 5 minutes to load them in the car, and then about another, hour and a half for Larry to say goodbye, because like Columbo, he's always got one more thing. Anyway, fast forward a week or two, I had returned the planters and the buckets to him, and he swung by here at church last week. He stopped on his way at Mavericks and bought roast beef sandwiches and onion rings, top notch, from Mavericks on his way here for Pastor Lee and for myself. So he comes in, and we go into the Jerusalem room where we can social distance across 6-foot tables there. And I am paying much more attention to my roast beef sandwich than I am to the conversation that's going on. And that's what gets me into trouble between the hosta and the box, which I can't tell the difference between. We're sitting there eating, and Larry asks me, so how about those hostas? We've been moving lately, and so I've been loading and unloading boxes. And so when he said, how about those hostas? I thought he said, how about those boxes? And so I looked at Larry and he said, oh, I said, I've thrown them all in the dumpster, which was not quite the answer he expected. Now, fortunately, Pastor Lee noticed that Larry indeed had said hostas. And so when I said that I'd thrown them all in the dumpster, he too was a little bit surprised. The look on Larry's face, of course, was priceless. If I hadn't been his pastor, he probably would have popped me one over this. But fortunately, Pastor Lee helped pave the way there, and we resolved everything. And Larry was convinced that I had not indeed thrown all the plants in the dumpster like I said I had, but that I had indeed actually planted them and that they were doing well. We had a good laugh over it. He had a good story to tell his wife Casey when he came home, and that's another point of my story. Is Larry always has good stories, and he doesn't ever tell old ones because something new is always happening to Larry. When you're in his company, something is going to happen. A story is going to be created while you watch it unfold. The point of all this is that we probably should all pay better attention to when people are speaking around us. We've certainly seen that in our day and age. Things are happening. We make assumptions about people or groups of people that we just should not be making. Things are said, things are not heard, and there we are. The Romans had a saying, I don't know the Latin, but the thing was that we have two ears, we have one mouth, And the idea is that we should listen twice as much as we talk. That's harder for some of us than others, but it's a good idea for all of us to take that principle to heart these days, that we should listen twice as much as we talk. The eighth commandment is not just about not lying about people, it's also about putting the best construction on things. When we see something happen with our neighbor, there could be any number of explanations for what they've done and why they've done it. We should try to put the best construction on that. If we've got questions, we should probably talk to them about that and not rush to assumptions. You and I both know what happens when we assume things. We're going to find out a lot more from our neighbor if we ask them questions about their life and their family and their community rather than just to make assumptions about them. If we listen twice as much as we talk, I think we're all going to be a lot better off. Just a little something to think about this week. Don't assume, ask questions, listen twice as much as you talk. It sure would have gotten me out of trouble this week if I had listened a little better and not told Larry that I'd thrown all of his hostas in the dumpster. That's not what I said. That's not what I heard, but that's what he heard because of what I said. Anyway, we all need to be a little bit more careful in that department. So listen twice, speak once, and continue to put the best construction on what your neighbor says, especially during these days. Have a great week.